Hello, and welcome to Nature Connects, TNC and Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, influencers, and our partners from the Northeast and around the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Allison Bowden, Director of Science and Strategy for TNC in Massachusetts. I'm excited to be joined today by Deanna Ruiz and Paula Peters of the Native Land Conservancy, an organization that is nationally recognized for land rescue, restoration, and protection, and also the first Native American-led land conservation organization east of the Mississippi. The Native Land Conservancy holds title to over 69 acres across 7 towns in Massachusetts, has easements in Mashpee, Middleborough, Dennis, and Central Alabama, and cares for and stewards land to restore native plant species, manage for invasive species, and clear waterways for fish passage. Before we dive into today's program, I wanted to share a little about our guests. Executive Director Deanna Ruiz earned her doctorate in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she focused on the conservation of biodiversity. Deanna has engaged in conservation efforts around the world, from sustainable agriculture alongside the Shuar people of the Amazon, to tracking gorillas and chimpanzees in Cameroon, to researching humpback whales in Madagascar. Paula Peters is Native Land Conservancy's Communications and Programs Coordinator, and Paula is a socially, culturally, and politically active citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. A former journalist, Paula is an independent scholar and writer of Wampanoag history and contemporary culture. She's been a vocal advocate for land and water concerns in Mashpee for many years and was among the founding board of directors of NLC. As you think of questions for Deanna and Paula, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Thanks so much for joining us today. Deanna and Paula, I'll pass it on to you to get started.
Wanikisak, Nutasuis Sonkwabin, Nutapas Massapiak. My name is Paula Peters. I just gave you my introduction in my traditional language. I was born on the land my people have lived on for 12,000 years. It has been my inherited responsibility to protect and care for the land and live in harmony with all living beings. The earth, the mother of all life, sustains us physically, culturally, and spiritually. And when she is abused, we feel the pain of that abuse as if we are wounded ourselves. In response to this abuse we have witnessed and the ongoing threat to the environment and the climate, the Native Land Conservancy was established as the first Native-led land conservation organization east of the Mississippi to rescue and restore land as a relative in need, to foster healthy and natural environments, and to provide safe spaces for people to reconnect with nature.
Hello, again, my name is Deanna Ruiz, and I serve the Native Land Conservancy as its executive director. My family comes from Mexico, and I'm Chicana. Like Paula, it has been instilled in me from a young age that we owe gratitude, respect, and care to the land that sustains us. It has always resonated deeply within me that all living beings are our relatives. Working at the Native Land Conservancy has allowed me to contribute to protecting land and supporting the Indigenous cultures that are inexorably tied to it. I'm grateful to be with you today and for the opportunity to share about our work. To take it back some 400 years, I'd like to touch upon how we got here. On the top map, it shows the historical native land base, while the bottom shows the colonized native land base in 2021. Colonization and the development of the nation that is the United States of America came at a great cost to Indigenous people who suffered from sickness, enslavement, wars, and forced assimilation. Despite these oppressive conditions, many tribes maintain their presence and advocate for social, cultural, and environmental justice across Turtle Island. The people indigenous to these lands are born stewards of it, responsible for rescuing land wherever possible and restoring it to the condition that the ancestors would recognize. Zooming into where the Native Land Conservancy is based, this map shows the traditional homelands of the Northeastern tribal nation. Prior to colonization, many Eastern woodland tribes thrived throughout New England. The Native Land Conservancy is based in Mashpee, shown here on Cape Cod, within the ancestral homelands of the Wampanoag Nation.
The NLC was founded in 2012 by my cousin, Ramona Peters, who is a modern traditional Wampanoag elder and a member of the Bear Clan. Ramona was inspired by the lessons she learned from her elders. The changes that they have experienced in our homelands have been devastating and threatening to our traditional way of life. All of us at NLC are connected to the land and to our natural environment in a very spiritual way. As such, our worldview is different from other land conservation groups. We are inspired to rescue all land, and in particular, the homelands of our ancestors that are spiritual and emotional sanctuaries for Indigenous people. We are motivated by our Indigenous heritage that links us to the Earth Mother and Ramona's leadership to rescue, protect, and restore land. We are not a political organization. No one on our board speaks on behalf of their tribe or their clan. We only speak on behalf of the land that we seek to rescue. Our board is intentionally tribally diverse. Currently, members include Indigenous people from the Mashpee, Herring Pond, and Aquinnah Wampanoag tribes, and also the Nipmuc people. The board is only open to Indigenous people, while our membership is open to everyone.
Our mission is to preserve and restore healthy landscapes for all living things wherever possible. We draw upon our collective traditional cultural knowledge as Indigenous peoples with generations of direct experience in the woodlands, coastlands, and waterways of our ancestral homelands. Our mission is expressed in many ways. It might be in protecting ancient village sites and burials, restoring ecological resiliency, and untangling what that looks like in our shifting climate, protecting the sacred connection between Indigenous people and their homelands, and gatherings like today, in hopes of sharing the values and perspectives that we believe will lead to a brighter, healthier future for all. Okay, this is the last map, I promise. And happily, it's actually a little out of date already because we have a half dozen additional projects coming to fruition very soon. The Native Land Conservancy protects land in many ways. In the green on this map, you'll see existing land holdings. We hold the fee interest to 69 acres across 7 towns. The yellow signifies bequeathments, wherein people donate their homes after they pass on. One such house has made our fellowship program possible. I'll talk more about that later. The purple indicates conservation easements or conservation restrictions. We protect 811 acres through conservation easements. Orange shows cultural respect easements, of which we hold on 460 acres. You'll notice that our furthest protected place is in Alabama. Recall that while the Native Land Conservancy is based in Mashpee, we operate nationally. Now I'm going to touch a little bit on conservation restrictions. A common approach, an approach that is common to many land conservation groups. In Massachusetts, we call them conservation restrictions. Most other places are called conservation easements. The conservation easement is a legally binding agreement wherein the landowner voluntarily gives up development rights to their land for the sake of conservation. In Massachusetts, the standard model designates indigenous cultural landscapes as a reason for protecting land and prompts landowners to consider allowing indigenous cultural practices on their land. Our approach to conservation easements is to use these inclusions to protect landscapes, not just for their ecological value, but also for their cultural significance, and to protect indigenous relationship and access to these lands. It also provides an opportunity for partnership with landowners, whether they're municipalities, conservation groups, or individuals. This is an important and historic statement of recognition and new level of sensitivity to the intrinsic values of the Indigenous people within Massachusetts.
You might be asking,
Getting back to that purple dot within Massachusetts, one conservation easement that we are especially honored to be a part of was one that was established for the people of Egan-Euthanasia. Egan-Euthanasia is a sustainable Muskogee eco-village located in Coosa County, Alabama, where the people all practice language immersion, speaking only in their original language and centering sustainability with the land, wildlife, and natural environment. It is land where they are reintroducing buffalo and endangered sturgeon. When we first traveled to the village to meet the people and experience our land, we made a ceremonial offering to express our commitment to the land they love. We established a native-to-native partnership with the people of Egan-Euthanasia, who asked us to hold a conservation easement to rescue 776 acres of their ancestral homelands. And now I'll pass it on to Paula.
thanks. You might be wondering what we mean by land rescue. Recently, we were able to step in and save a critically important piece of land on the island of Martha's Vineyard that's overlooking the Gay Head Cliffs. This land is particularly sacred to the Aquinnah Wampanoag people and had gone on the market for sale. That was devastating news to the Aquinnah tribal people, who were fearful that it would become further developed and access to the cliffs and this important piece of land would be lost forever. At the 11th hour, the NLC stepped in to purchase the parcel, buying time for the Aquinnah Land Initiative to fundraise the purchase for the cost of the land. The ALI, Aquinnah Land Initiative, is an emerging Aquinnah Wampanoag Land Trust that we are sharing our lessons with so that they can be a successful land trust as well, including inviting one of their board members to join our board. I want to talk a little bit about the Wampanoag Common Lands, which is a prime example of what land protection and preserving native lifeways looks like for the NLC. This particular piece of land is 32.4 acre parcel located in Kingston, Massachusetts, which is in the heart of the ancestral homelands of the Wampanoag Nation. It was donated to the NLC to hold on behalf of the Wampanoag people. This allows us to be able to provide space for undisturbed cultural practice and to allow tribal members to lead in its protection and its restoration. The NLC is simply the caretaker of this land, and we respond to the needs of both the land and the people. We turn to the Wampanoag community to make decisions about siting structures like an open-air pavilion that's being constructed on the land in the coming weeks, and a wetu that we built there, and a traditional lodge. The Wampanoag Common Lands is home also to important plants and animals like the deer and the river otters and the raccoon, and the globally rare boneset. That is the white flower that you see in the center picture of this slide. This land has the healthiest population of this plant in Massachusetts. Another rare plant that thrives there is the pink Plymouth gentian, which is also endangered. The NLC will make sure that this rare beauty is not only protected, but flourishes again in its home environment. Bear with me if as Indigenous people, taking care of the land means more to us than just pulling weeds. Everything is approached with a ceremonial practice to show that our thanksgiving to the land and all that she gives us. We don't view land as a static exhibit. We are in active, reciprocal, and familial relationship to the land. We use the best practices in restoration, science, blended with traditional ecological knowledge to meet the needs of the land. When we remove invasive species like knotweed or bittersweet, we return native species in their place, focusing on culturally significant plants that may be less accessible in other areas, such as bulrush.
We look to the past and traditions for guiding principles, and we also use innovative technologies to help address our new problems. One example is using passive monitoring to understand what lives on the land with us and how they are using the landscape. At the Wampanoag Commonlands, we suspected that the bat population might be declining due to loss of nesting habitat and global declines. So we mobilized to build and install 4 bat boxes and deployed a bioacoustic monitor in order to track their activity and species compositions. And if you'll indulge me, and if PowerPoint will behave, I'd like to play you such a recording. Of course, this has been pitched down several frequencies in order to be audible to the human ear. But what you'll hear is a clip of a big brown bat, which is a species at the Wampanoag Commonlands. And as the frequency of its calls increase, that's how you know it's zeroing in on its target, which hopefully would be something like a mosquito. It's vitally important to us as we study the land and our relatives that live on it, that we do as little harm as possible. So employing these types of devices, in-game cameras and other passive recorders is a really effective strategy for us. I also want to note that a huge part of this work is done by our volunteers and fellows who it really wouldn't be possible without. There we go. We recognize that a part of our work must be to prepare the next generation of land caretakers. One way that we do this is through our fellowship program. We offer a 10-week paid summer fellowship program to up to 3 Native Americans with an interest in conservation. They can come from any educational or professional background as long as they have an interest in a career in conservation. Each one is paired with a mentor from Mass Audubon, our partners, to help them develop an individual project. That project must benefit the land, feed one of their interests, and help them build professional skills. We schedule a myriad of excursions that are professional and cultural, including attending Mashpee Wampanoag Tribes powwow or visiting preserves with biologists to even banding birds. The expectation is to introduce them to both the local tribes and a wide range of positions within conservation. So far, we've had tremendous success with 2 of our recent fellows securing positions with environmental groups. And we're getting ready to welcome our next cohort of fellows this June.
Today, the Native Land Conservancy holds cultural respect easements on more than 460 acres. And we're working with new partners to develop more legal frameworks to guarantee and protect Indigenous cultural access to land. It's the closest thing that you can get to land rematriation without actually transferring a deed. And it is a way for landowners to demonstrate their respect for Indigenous culture and our unique relationship to our ancestral homelands. Regardless of who or what lives there, those lands remain part of our Indigenous legacy. Our caring doesn't go away when a new boundary is placed. We appreciate the existence of conservation groups, especially those that are open to sharing the space with tribal people to carry on their traditional cultural practices. To learn more about CREs, you want to keep an eye on our website because this October we'll be publishing additional materials on them. One of the ways that we engage the public and specifically our membership is to have programs and events where we promote the best practices for living in balance with nature. We have nature walks and land care days, and recently we invited a conservationist gardener designer to come and speak about how to use Indigenous plantings to create sustainable landscapes, and that was really popular. We host culturally based programs featuring traditional music, food, and crafts that are exclusively for our tribal community. This year, we also partnered with the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe to host the first Honor the Earth Fair with more than 30 environmental conservation exhibitors that was attended by more than 350 people from our community.
So perhaps now you're asking yourself, how can I get more involved? Well, there are several ways to engage with the type of work that we're doing. One is to donate what you can, whether that's land, funds, easement, or skills. The next, perhaps most important, is to learn about the places and the original people where you work, live, and visit. I believe there's a link in the chat with a helpful resource to start that education. Another is to live lightly by taking only what you need from the earth and practicing sustainability. Also important is to be thankful. Even if you don't have a cultural tradition around giving thanks, be grateful, find your own. And of course, share the planet with all of our relatives. We have a responsibility to all living beings, all of us together. Thank you for listening to us. We really appreciate your attention and hope that you found some value in what we shared.
Deanna and Paula, thank you so much for sharing that incredible work and knowledge with us. Your work demonstrates how including and reflecting Indigenous peoples' traditional and cultural knowledge of their ancestral homelands, combined with science and other ways of knowing, will move us all forward in protecting, preserving, and restoring land. So we have some questions from our audience. I'd like to move on to those now. And just as a reminder, as you think of questions for Deanna and Paula, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So one question, how does NLC work with tribal groups to help preserve land?
Did you want to go ahead with that, Deanna?
Sure. Well, one way that comes to mind is through our partnership with our partners in Alabama, Eagan Felicia. And of course, we're talking to other tribal groups too that are interested in connecting with us. But as a land trust, we're kind of in this unique position where we're within the conservation world, but also connected to the Indigenous community. And so we can kind of facilitate the drafting of easements and ensure that those are executed respectfully and with the Indigenous perspective and understanding of how the relationship to the land is appropriate. I also want to note that TNC also partners with Egan Euthanasia in Alabama, helping them with prescribed burns, which is crucial to that environment. Paula, do you want to share anything about our work with your tribe?
Sure. It's been a really easy relationship with the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe because we're right here in Mashpee. But it's also been really fulfilling. We were able this year, as I mentioned, we had the Honor the Earth Fair, which was established so that we could do something to celebrate Earth Day, even though it was a couple of days ahead of time. And it was a great collaboration with the tribe. We used their facility and we're able to host more than 30 environmental and conservation organizations that really lends itself to our mission to spread the word about preserving and conserving our Mother Earth.
Awesome. Would you like to say any more along the same lines about how you collaborate with other conservation organizations?
Well, certainly in the region, the Cape and Islands, it's a very close community. We've got 15 towns. I'm not sure exactly how many other conservation organizations, but we do collaborate quite regularly with these other organizations. Like the first of the year, the Barnstable Land Trust established a first day hikes. And they invite us to participate in that and bringing our membership out to, even though it seems like a rather cold day of the year to get out there and walk in the woodlands, it actually is a pretty popular event, and many of the other conservation groups are doing it at the same time. And even though we're in different places, it feels like we're all together.
Wonderful. Did you have anything you'd like to add to that, Deanna?
Sure. I guess I would just add that another really important way that we partner with our conservation partners is through legal frameworks like cultural respect easements. We're really fortunate that there's additional interest in building new of these and advancing the templates that we have. We're certainly open to new partnerships, but also through conservation restrictions, which I described earlier as being a tool for us to also ensure that the connection between Indigenous communities and their homelands is permanent and protected. I guess the other thing I would add is that we also have like kind of blended partnerships with larger conservation groups like TNC included, where we're able to kind of tap into the more resourced organizations. I'd say the staff of 4, we're small but mighty, and partnering with our larger partners really helps build our capacity.
There's a lot of interest in the idea of cultural respect easements, a number of different questions along those lines. I'll start with a sort of fundamental one about how cultural respect easements differ from Aboriginal rights.
Sure. Well, Aboriginal rights are treaty rights that were established many years ago, and many of them emerge out of our relationships in colonization. And as a tribe, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe has fought very hard to maintain our Aboriginal rights throughout our process of federal acknowledgement. And we are actually one of the only tribes, I believe we're the only tribe that maintained through from first contact our Aboriginal right to hunting and fishing. But cultural respect easements are different from that. These are easements that are established with either landowners directly or with conservation groups that acknowledge the indigenous connection to the earth are, we're culturally and spiritually connected to the land, and need to be in these spaces to conduct ourselves, sometimes for ceremony, sometimes for foraging, for gathering. And these easements are just an acknowledgement that that part of our heritage, our culture continues. And it not only acknowledges that, it welcomes us to be in these spaces and conduct ourselves as we would traditionally.
Yeah, just
Go
add
ahead.
that another distinction between Aboriginal rights and cultural respect easements is that cultural respect easements have the ability to shift the burden of proof of a retained right from the exerciser and the individual to kind of the conservation organization is stepping forward and saying, we're giving this right to this group of people, instead of having to prove that someone has these retained ancient rights.
Can you say a little bit more about how that, how does someone who wants to use this right or easement, how does their access to that land differ? How is their experience different? Does that question make sense? I'm asking that one.
Yeah, well, no, it does. I think you mean, how does it differ from the average person who's going to visit, say, a nature trail in Dennis, where we have these Aboriginal rights? I think that it's different because we are who we are. So I'm not sure if I can transfer that to you. Because you can't have that experience. You don't have that traditional, you're not based in our traditions and our culture. It might be something that we are experiencing at a time for harvesting a certain type of wild edible plants, or it might be a time where we know that we have to pay respect to certain birds or animals. So it really all depends on, what is the circumstance, but having to return to our ancestral homelands and conduct ourselves as we would as traditional Wampanoag people is an important part of who we are.
And I think that our hope with cultural respect easements too is that Indigenous people do feel welcome and safe going into these spaces and practicing, because of course they've continued to do that regardless, but it has not been historically safe. And there's plenty of articles you can read about that online, so I won't go too deep there, but that's a major goal that we work on with our partners with cultural respect easements.
So part of the agreement is for the person or an organization granting the agreement is also to defend it, right? That the people who are using the agreement are, if I grant it to you, I'm saying at the same time that I will defend that right, that it's part of my obligation in extending that to make it safe for you to do those practices. Is that an important piece of the story?
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of the story. The relationship does not end at the recording of the document. We continue to touch base with the board and staff with these organizations to reinforce the relationship and remind us why these agreements are important. We ask that our partners reach out to their local community to explain what cultural respect easements are and to let them know that they might see something other than passive recreation We also ask that if there is a ceremony that wants to be conducted, if we give them enough notice, would they consider closing down that trail so that there's not disturbance or interruption of that practice.
Can you talk at all, and perhaps this is a question for Deanna, but of course you're both welcome, some of the legal challenges or technical challenges that you work through with partners in order to establish these?
Yeah, well, that could be a webinar in its own. So I'll try to stick high level. I think one thing that we've learned is there's a lot of relationship building that happens before we get to the point that we're ready to sign and record these documents. And there needs to be trust and understanding from both sides. And we can't rush these relationships. So as we're negotiating the terms of what type of access is appropriate for a site, is wanted from the Indigenous community, and is comfortable for all parties, we really take our time on finding common ground for those conversations. It can be challenging when attorneys get involved, and we navigate that with our partners and try to prep them to understand that, help the attorneys also understand the spirit of the agreement. And we also attach with these documents, which are very heavy in legalese, letters authored by leaders from both organizations describing the spirit of the document, so that's always a part of it, and expresses that.
Thank you. There's a question here about, do you reach out to individual towns? I'll extend that. Do you reach out, or do you hope for others to come to you? So they say they live in a town that has a conservation commission. Perhaps they could reach out to you.
Yeah, we love when partners are willing and come to us, because that shows they're at least open to the idea, whether it's a conservation restriction, cultural respect easement, or a transfer of deed. That certainly goes a long way. Again, being a small but mighty team, we don't want to take the difficult path unless it's absolutely necessary.
So there's a few other topics that I think I'll jump to, and one of them is about, you mentioned that you do events. What are some events that you have coming up where folks can help you out?
Oh, sure. Well, we love for people to go to our website and see on our events page, there are oftentimes the events that are listed, land care days. In particular, we have a couple of days that are scheduled coming up where we will actually be doing some land care at the Wampanoag Common Lands, and also we're raising an open air pavilion that the people at Timber Homes Vermont are helping us to construct. And this is going to be an absolutely beautiful open air pavilion that is made with naturally formed wood. And it's going to provide a bit of shelter on that land for us to gather and have ceremonies and have celebrations, those kind of gatherings on the land. We also we have land care at other of our parcels of land, like we have some land in Yarmouth that we're doing a land care day there that's coming up pretty soon. And we host oftentimes speakers at our headquarters here in Mashpee. We had, as I mentioned, we had the speaker who came to talk about using indigenous plantings in your landscape. And next month, we will be having a speaker come talk about our relationship with the ocean in honor of World Oceans Day. And these are things, like I said, they're on our website. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we regularly shout out about these things there. I'd love to have everybody come.
Fantastic. And I know Muddy Pond well. I used to monitor the Plymouth Gentian New England bone set there early in my career. So it's very exciting to see the engagement there. So you mentioned a number of really exciting events coming up here in Massachusetts. One of our listeners is in New Jersey and would like to know if there's a way that they can get involved there.
Well, we don't have any programs in New Jersey. We are certainly happy to have someone who's that far away become a member. And you know, at some point, if we are doing something that is you know, available by Zoom, because sometimes we do have meetings that can be made available through a Zoom connection. We could let them know. We are always happy to get membership and support from people everywhere. So just because they're in New Jersey doesn't mean, you know, they aren't valuable constituents to us.
So if folks follow your social media, they'll find all the events that you offer, including some that like this one
Right.
could be available to folks everywhere.
Right. And also becoming a member, they would get our regular newsletters that are put out quarterly. And that contains a lot of valuable and interesting information for people wherever you are.
Great, thank you. So there's a question here. Can you talk about how the work to restore rivers impacts your communities? Maybe say a little bit more about what that work is.
Well, we have done in the past, we have done river cleanups. I see you've got all the herring swimming behind you, and you know, it's so critically important that the herring have a clear path on their mission to get to the ponds and to spawn. That's a very big part of our heritage here, and our connection to the earth and the waters and all of the wildlife. In particular, the herring is really a big part of our culture here. So keeping the herring run open and clear is pretty important. Maybe Deanna, do you are there other river projects that we've been involved in that maybe we should talk about?
Well, I think you nailed it. Generally, just we're so happy to see these dam removals happening and the restoration of the herring runs, and we're grateful to all the partners involved with that, TNC included. I do think one of our board members, Pam Ellis, said it best. She's Hasinamisco Nipmuc. She said that when the fish return, we return. And I think that puts it best.
I understand that the Wampanoag New Year is in the spring. Is that true?
Well, yes, and there's a good reason for that. That's when everything comes to life again. When you think about it, midwinter, everyone is still resting. The animals are resting or even hibernating. And it's the same for the fish and even the insects. So for us, it's kind of a silly time of year to celebrate a new year when everybody's still sleeping. We wake up in the spring when the herring return and when the growth returns to the forests and the forests come to life with the wildlife again. That's also the time for us to honor our new year.
Thank you. Sticking with the water theme, you showed a photo of the Aquina Cliffs and the property that you acquired there or helped to return. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about climate change? The erosion there on those cliffs is hard to miss in that photo. How are you thinking about climate change and its impacts and opportunities to engage in adaptation?
Well, I'll let Deanna talk about engaging in adaptation. I can just tell you that it's very, very clear to us. I mean, the Aquina Cliffs is a very obvious example, but the changes in weather patterns and how that's impacted us just culturally and tribally, how we harvest plants and animals in our hunting and fishing. It's really impacted us all the way around. I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen dramatic change in the climate here on Cape Cod to the point where, well, the best example I can give you is that I no longer can make snow sculptures, which I did every winter. Always had a beautiful snow sculpture in my yard that I created with my children. Of course, I'd kick them out after I got really serious about it and wanted it to look just right. But yeah, I haven't been able to do that in about 5 years.
Yeah, I think we think about climate change and all of our parcels that we hold. I mean, the warming waters, all of the sea level rise, just based on where we are, there's so many impacts. And that's why it's important that while we're being guided by traditional values and traditional ecological knowledge, that we're also partnering with the Western science that hopefully can help us find some of the solutions to these new complex problems. Since we intend to just be the kind of transient holders of the land in Aquina, we're letting our Aquina-based partners take the lead on that, but I know they're working with local groups to find solutions to protect those sacred cliffs, which are really interesting. And there's been incredible archaeological research on finding mastodon teeth and dating back to the supercontinent Pangaea. So I encourage anyone to do a little Google rabbit hole if you need to kill some time.
I'll definitely have to check that out. I don't think I've heard about the mastodon teeth on Martha's Vineyard. That's really cool. So I think I will jump back to a couple more questions about cultural respect. Have there been any situations where it was difficult to balance the needs of Native people or culture and the needs of the land or ecological health? If so, how have you approached or resolved those situations, or what have you learned from trying to resolve them?
In my limited experience, it hasn't been an issue. The traditionalists who want to practice and engage in practices on the land understand how to do it respectfully and sustainably. Over harvesting isn't an issue because there's an understanding that you only take what you need and what a patch can sustain. And those are paired with practices of replanting plants. These people who are going out and doing the traditional practices, it's not easy stuff too. They take it very seriously and they're doing it respectfully. I don't know, Paula, if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
I think I agree that we have had limited experience with it, and there've been limited experience to even challenge what we've been doing. I think people would have a hard time recognizing that something different is going on in some cases.
Yeah,
I don't know, except for you might not want me to bring this up, but there was during our recent walk through the Dennis territories, there was someone who was distributing tobacco as with gratitude for the walk and gratitude for the earth. And there was a neighbor of the property who saw that and thought that that person was littering. So I guess that's the closest thing to a challenge of what we're trying to do. And the tour guide, the tour leader, very graciously went over and spoke to the neighbor and explained what was going on. And I think they understood.
A good learning moment.
Yes, I'd like to think so.
That's great. Along those lines, I am a scientist trained in the Western tradition, and as we said in the opening, Deanna, you are as well. How do you think about measuring? You know, how do you bring together the traditional ways of knowing shared by your partners in the organization and beyond, and what you learned in graduate school?
That's a
Sorry,
really
that's a
good
hard
question.
question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I love it. It is one that I think about probably on a daily basis. I mean, one thing is I do bring some of my scientific training to, for instance, invasive plant removal that we do. We're using non-chemical strategies. We're documenting patch size through time and effort put into it so that hopefully if we find something that works for us, we can share it with other land conservation groups. Of course, there are some things that we don't share, like ceremonial practices and things like that that might go along with some of the work that we do. And I think that it was certainly eye-opening to me, kind of get into tunnel vision with graduate school, but being very generously welcomed into the community here. I remember going for a walk in my early time with the Native Land Conservancy with one of our board members, and he was describing how there was a loss of a species and how that affected all the other species that it fed on. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a trophic cascade. I learned about that in graduate school. And he's talking about it as a learning and understanding that has been passed down for 10, 12,000 years. So it kind of right-sized in my mind that a lot of the discoveries in science might have already been discovered or have been borrowed or stolen from traditional ecological knowledge and understandings. But I certainly think that there is a path forward to blend these things, and I think there has to be, because we are facing a new climate and we want everyone to be able to enjoy a healthy, safe environment and to be in deeper relationship to the land. And I think that perspective is a key part of it, along with the practical tools and innovations in science that can help us improve our current status.
Wonderful, thank you. Did you have any thoughts on that you'd like to add, Paula?
No, I think Deanna did a great job.
Excellent. Well, we're approaching the end of our time today. Deanna and Paula, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I just would like to say how grateful we are for having this opportunity. We know that Nature Conservancy is so highly regarded around the region and around the world, I would say. And to be able to speak to your audience is certainly a great privilege. It is also a great privilege anytime we have an opportunity to explain our connection with the land and the significance of our traditional ecological knowledge and our traditional connection to the land, and what makes that important and what makes us unique in that way as an Indigenous land conservation organization. So, kutapatanemu.
Our pleasure. Deanna?
I would echo Paula's sentiment, just feeling very grateful to our partners. It means a lot to be able to amplify our message and to reach a new audience. And I think a diversity of approaches is necessary to solving the challenges ahead. And hopefully, if there's anyone out there that our approach resonates with them, they'll carry a piece of that into their daily life, whether that's, just biking to work or buying less, or however that expression is comfortable for you. We just hope that you'll consider bringing in an Indigenous perspective into the way you walk the land.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you again to all of you who support TNC and NLC so generously. We'll be sending everyone a follow-up email over the coming days with a link to the recording of this webinar. We've shared some information links in the chat. I apologize to those who had questions. There were a lot of quite specific questions about examples of easement languages and things like that. We can put together some information and share it out with the webinar link. And of course, you can be in touch with us as well with additional questions. If you're enjoying our webinars, please be sure to share them with your friends and colleagues. And you can follow us on social media at conserve_MA on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with our work and get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect with us. And as always, you can register for future webinars at nature.org/MA webinars. Our next webinar is on May 30th, where I'll be joined by TNC Massachusetts Land Steward Rennie Wendell for a virtual tour of TNC's Drury Preserve out in Sheffield. We hope you can join us then. Thank you again and have a wonderful afternoon.